So I'm here with Pete Mueller, our Pastor Pete, and we're going to talk about this mission trip, because when we've come home from mission trips, one of the things is always to talk about what impressed you the most, what things you learned the most, and what your feelings are about going on the mission trip, and really to talk it out amongst the group. So next year when you go on a mission trip and you go down to Guatemala, that'll be one of the things. Each evening we'll talk as a group about what we learned that day and what things really surprised us and impressed upon us. And then at the end of the trip we have these 10 hours of getting home, of going to the airport in Guatemala and then flying somewhere and getting on another plane and flying more, so we got lots of time to talk. So I want to talk about this mission trip and what were some of the things that impressed you the most.
Well, I think just how this mission trip was put together actually gives those at home experiencing it a somewhat of an idea of what it would be like to be on a real mission trip, an actual one, and if you did all the challenges to realize that just sometimes daily things we take for granted, like drinking water out of a tap or not having to flush the toilet with toilet paper, those kind of things, you can begin to appreciate that there's a tremendous difference between our lifestyle and the lifestyle of most of the world. And on a mission trip, you not only are bringing the love of Christ and serving, but you're experiencing, and you're yourself, you're growing in your understanding of the world around us, and that is huge. And so I felt like this week has been a good opportunity to capture some of that, to start to understand some of that.
Yeah, I like that about growing, because so often you walk into ministry situations and you think, okay, so what am I going to give here? And you find out that you actually get more than it seems like you give with
Exactly.
all that you learn and all that. So that first day with the geography and the history video, and that one was pretty fast moving. But what it also made me want to do is I want to go on vacation in Guatemala, not just a mission trip.
Right. And I've been there 3 times, and really, if you listen to Jorge in his talk, he talked about usually one day out of the week spent at hard at work. There's a rest day, and we've been going to Antigua, the former colonial capital. But that just kind of whets your appetite, because there's just so much more to Guatemala than Antigua or Guatemala City. And it would be a great place to be able to explore the Mayan culture, some of the other beautiful sceneries. I know we saw in the airport every time young people with backpacks and things that were obviously going off to do tourist things in Guatemala. And it's a big part of their economy. They count on that, so it's obviously impacted them during COVID. But you're right, it would be a great place to visit.
To go, yeah. We've been there 5 times, and every time we go to Antigua, and I'm like, okay, we got to go somewhere new. Right. We're going to go see that Mayan things. We're going to go to the lake, and maybe we'll climb up the volcano. You ready to go to the volcano?
I am, yeah. Jorge gave us whetted our appetite. They're roasting a marshmallow over an actual volcano. Yeah. Bring some chocolate and graham crackers, though.
One of those cool things. And then
s'mores.
One of the things also that always gets to me is when you do see the needs that are there. Particularly, we've always been impacted by the medical needs. When we go into the clinic and they take us to where the medicine is, and there's nothing on the shelves except stuff they don't use, and they're in need. And so we always bring this stuff. But this time, Jorge is showing us the pictures of the hospitals, the good hospitals,
right,
and what their COVID patients were doing in the waiting rooms and the hallways, and just the great need. I mean, that was probably the most impactful thing I saw on this trip, was the pictures of the hospitals.
Right, because we've been down there, and there's always a chance that you could get injured or you could get sick and would need to go to some kind of medical facility. And we were always glad that we hadn't had to do that, because even in the Hogar, in the children's home, they have an arrangement with an ambulance service, and they take the kids to a private hospital, because the public ones it's not where you go to get better, unfortunately. And so there's just, the medical infrastructure is so limited that on our trips, we were just really grateful nobody would have to go. But I don't think we had really any idea exactly what that really looks like. You know, we picture some things in our mind, but those pictures that Jorge showed us really reinforce the lack of medical care. So one of the exciting things about Child Beyond, what they're able to do, they put in a grant for the LWML, their last convention, and they were able to get $100,000 to buy a bus and equip it as a medical bus, because two of the leading pastors, in fact the president of the Guatemalan Lutheran Church, he and his brother are doctors.
Oh, wow.
And there's one church that I went on one visit to the doctor's church, and they do have a little clinic inside the church for that rural community. And so they had asked us to bring medical supplies to outfit that clinic. Well, the Guatemalan Lutheran Church will be able to use that medical bus to go to many more communities. So it's going to be a real blessing. There's such a need, even before COVID.
Yeah, that'll be great. I know even within St. Matthew there are so many nurses.
Yeah.
And, you know, my wife's gone down there, and there's other nurses that would be willing to go down and help out with the bus. So I think that would be a great thing for the future.
And I think Jorge said that one of the goals would be to have some medical mission trips,
Right.
and use that bus as the means to go to those villages. It's pretty exciting.
That would be wonderful. So then we had the food. You didn't get the food?
No, I didn't. I got the recipes and I'm getting ready to try those, but I didn't get it.
So
The real thing.
The food was wonderful. The spice was very spicy. I had a little tiny bit in my beans. You know, some people put a lot in, you know, have a lot of that spice. But we had a great time with the food and with the drink that was here. And that's another thing. You've been to Guatemala 3 times. What do you think of the food?
I've found that the food was really good. One of the advantages of going with Child Beyond International, you stay in their mission house that they rent. They have a wonderful cook. She comes in, Isa, and she makes breakfast for us. And we pack our own lunch. But then when we get back from the building site, she has a dinner ready for us, a Guatemalan dinner, and it's always delicious. Her corn chowder is to die for. It's so good. Yeah, but I really like the food in Guatemala.
So the problem is you go on a mission trip to Guatemala and you come back heavier.
That's right. We kind of worked it off though in the heat. So, but no, yeah, you're not going to go down and go hungry. She takes very good care of us.
And then the next day, Jorge took us around and showed us some of the village, showed us the houses that they make. You've done a house. We saw your picture circled there.
Right.
And that must be really something to see when a family gets a house.
It is probably the most moving time of the whole experience because we have fun on the work site. You know, your team bonds. That's one of the really great things. We had intergenerational team. We had teenagers. We had people in their 70s and everybody in between. And so working together day after day, you really get close to each other. But that moment when you turn the keys over to whoever that house was built for, it just makes it all worthwhile. I mean, it just really said this was a real thing. This was a real ministry. It wasn't some kind of ecotourism, some kind of volunteer tourism that you just go on to make yourself feel good. This actually impacts the family in a huge way. Not only the house, but the clean drinking water filter that we give them, huge. The stove that we build that vents outside so they don't get respiratory illnesses, huge. Just a life-changing experience for that family. And every time we've on a build, it seems every day somebody comes up to Jorge during the day and asks, can we come build them a house? And he talks to them and finds out the information, even if it's possible, because again, they have to own that property so the house that you build isn't taken away from them by a landlord. But yeah, it changes that whole community. They see the love of God, and we work with the local pastor so that this isn't just a physical building, but there's also a spiritual component that they're connected. This is God's people doing it because of their love for Jesus and for them, and that pastor then follows through, and that connects with that family.
Yep.
So,
I know walking through some of the tight villages and all the smoke coming from all the houses and going into a house where that fire is burning, and having the kids even getting sick with
Sure.
respiratory issues. The fact of being able to get those stoves to have a pipe that goes out the roof is so important, and it's a wonderful ministry to see that kind of thing happen.
It is, and then to give them the container for the clean drinking, the filtered, which was actually invented by a Guatemalan, and teaching them how to use it can make just such a huge difference. A lot of Guatemalan women drink almost nothing but coffee because then they're boiling it and it protects them, but then that creates other health problems
right.
too. So usually in these countries, one problem leads to another, and so if you can eliminate some at the beginning, you put a family so much further ahead. Kids are healthier; they can stay in school longer, then they can go, to advance farther. I mean, you're really making a difference.
Right. So then the next day we had that listening to understand. We got to hear from some Guatemalans that live here in the United States and what their hopes and dreams are, and some of the problems they have being here. And that touches your heart to hear, what they can and can't do and how they get taken advantage of, and how important that money is going back to their families there. Why would they put up with living here for 14 years and 7 years and 20 years and miss their family back home and have to live under this structure, except for the fact that they're taken care of. They feel like they are the support for their family, their community back home by sending their earnings back home and what they have to do. How can we help them in trying to give them support?
Absolutely, and I think for me, it broke down a lot of my assumptions about people who come to this country and try to make a life for themselves. And of course, helping their families back home is such a huge, huge part of why they're here. Because as they were talking about, just about something as simple as transportation. If you're in a community with limited public transportation and you can't have a car and drive, well, then how do you get to work? How can you have a job? So many things we take for granted. And it caused me to think, I've traveled in a number of foreign countries, and even places with public transportation, trying to figure that out was difficult. And but to experience that day after day would be it just drove home to me that we take so much for granted that we just don't realize how hard that would be to come to a country where you're not understood, you have trouble understanding them, and you can't even just get around. You can't even go to a store and properly buy something without maybe somebody giving you, as they talked about, kind of giving you the stink eye, like, why are you taking so long to do this transaction? And maybe people saying rude things and just feeling marginalized because of that. Or a landlord who says, well, you don't have the actual documents I need to rent this place to you, so I'm going to jack the rent up 50%. And you're the person that least can afford an increase in rent. Right. And yet you persevere through all that because you know that you're so critical for the family back home. And especially during COVID, when a lot of the Central Americans in the United States lost their jobs because they're on all those service kind of industries and hotel industries, the impact was huge back in Central America. I read articles in the news that saying they're literally starving in Central America because the workers up here in the United States were struggling to maintain their jobs.
Yeah. Well, and then the orphanage, Mandy telling us all about the orphanage and the kids and everything. So, that's the thing that people love to see, kids, smiling faces, and the need that there is down in Guatemala for orphanages to exist. And I think they call it a home.
Hogar. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the fun things about the mission trip actually being there is, as you saw from the interview with Mandy, it was such a joyful place with the kids. They're always so happy to see you. every evening after we finished working on the home, we would go over to the Hogar, and we'd just play with the kids for about a half an hour, 45 minutes before we'd go back to eat dinner. And they just melt your heart. It was interesting to see certain members of the team would gravitate to certain kids, and each day that they'd come, that would be their kid that they would go over and pick up and play with, and those kids would quickly, get it into under your skin. But the Hogar, the interesting thing about orphans in Guatemala is that there aren't a huge number of true orphans. In other words, kids who have lost both parents that have no family. Most of the kids in orphanages, in whether the government-run institutional ones or Christian private ones like Child Beyond's, most of the kids have a parent or even both parents, but they've been taken from the home, usually by a judge because of abuse of domestic abuse, sexual abuse, drug abuse, dad's in jail, some situation, and they literally take those kids out of that home situation, put them in one of these kind of children homes, and but then when that situation kind of changes, maybe fixes itself in a limited way, they'll take them back out of the children's home. So that makes it kind of hard. You minister to a lot of them come with really extreme health needs. Most of them have some kind of parasite or something that they get treated for. And the Hogar that CBI runs has a doctor on staff. They bring in a psychologist and a social worker weekly, because a lot of these kids have been abused themselves. And the kids are traumatized to be taken from home. And so they go through a process, and they learn how much love all the nannies give them and the staff. And they learn to accept that and open up, and then sometimes they're 6 months or a year later they're taken back out, and that's just the reality of it. There are some of the kids that will be in the Hogar there till they become adults, but for the 400,000 estimated quote-unquote orphans in Guatemala, many of them are in this transient back and forth, and there is no services outside of really governmental services like we have, child protective services kind of things, that when a kid goes back into the home, they don't have follow-up programs to say, or to teach mom and dad how new parenting skills or whatever. And so one of the goals of Child Beyond is to eventually get to the point where they can, not only if a child comes to them when it goes home, that they can go behind that return and give classes or help make a difference somehow, so the child doesn't have to come back to a home or back and forth. So real challenge.
So speaking of that, we have the ability to help out, that we can sponsor children, and so at the church or online you can go to Child Beyond International on the website, and you can sponsor a child. In the comment section, put St. Matthew so that they can keep track of the children that we're sponsoring there. And so please take some time. It's $40 a month, but that money gets used to take care of these children. And the children are there, they're 24/7 when they're there. So all that Pastor Pete just talked about costs real money, and this is a way that we can do something to help them, is by sponsoring a child. And then, of course, the other thing is the White Flag campaign. We've been talking about that. Jorge talked about the white flags. You saw the picture of the white flags out in front of people's houses. And, there's such a great need for food right now. So whatever money you can give to that, you can go online to Child Beyond International and go into the donation area, and then there's a thing called food, and so that's where you want to click on. You want to click on food and make a donation into that, and that'll go toward the White Flag campaign. So please take advantage of both of those things and help out these folks that are our neighbors, that are our Christian brothers and sisters that are in Guatemala, and be able to support Child Beyond.
And it's a legitimate, real ministry. I can vouch for that. Been there. My brother, Jeff, pastor of the congregation at Hood River, is the CEO, so to speak, of Child Beyond. And they just have a heart and compassion for these children. And God put that on them, and He brought them into this ministry, and He's going to sustain it. We just have an opportunity to join with them. It's a little bit different model than something like Compassion International or World Vision, where children come to a to a center every day and then go home to their families. Here you are literally helping to feed medical needs, clothe, take care of children 24/7 and make a huge difference in their lives.
So God bless you, and thank you for taking part in this virtual mission trip. I hope you get to go on a real mission trip in the coming years. We hope to go down and be in Guatemala and be part of this as well. And if you happen to be in the Bel Air area, tomorrow Pastor Pete's going to be preaching, and so you get to come hear him instead of me. So have a wonderful day. God bless you.